The Men of Iron, humanity's greatest creation and its single biggest mistake. The thinking machines that rebelled and very nearly wiped humans out of existence. You guys asked for this, so as the greatest democratic cow west of the Mississippi River, I was inclined to listen to my beloved herd. So today, in typical Fallen Cow fashion, we're diving into who the Men of Iron were, what kind of insane tech and abilities they had, and most importantly, where they scale compared to everything else in the Warhammer 40k universe. So as always, let's jump straight into the cowl. It's time to Powerscale. Before we can even begin to talk about how powerful the Men of Iron were, we first need to answer a much simpler question. What exactly were they? And I'll be honest with you, herd, we don't really know. The Men of Iron are one of the most mysterious factions in all of Warhammer 40k, with fragmented lore, conflicting implications, and just enough information to let us know things got completely out of hand. But as your favorite talking cow, I'm going to do my best to lay everything out as clearly as possible. The Men of Iron originated during the Dark Age of technology, at humanity's absolute peak, when mankind was dominating the galaxy. During this era, the Men of Iron were created by another class of artificial beings, who, get this, were also created by humanity. They were known as the Men of Stone, who used the Men of Iron to aid in the colonization of the galaxy. Naturally, that raises another question. Who were the Men of Stone? And hold on to your butts, this is where things can get a little confusing and a little bit messy. The Men of Stone are described as having half-life, which means they're not truly humans, which opens the door for a lot of different takes. Were they artificial humans, clones, or just something else entirely? Personally, I think there are three main possibilities. They were the first actual AIs created by mankind, or maybe even human consciousness uploaded into artificial bodies. Or maybe, get this, they were cyborgs, as in they were a fusion of flesh and machine. It's also very possible the term Men of Stone is a blanket one referring to all three, but if I had to pick one of these options, I think the first option makes the most sense. But regardless of who the Men of Stone truly were, from them came the Men of Iron.
What?
I know, this is already quite confusing, my little herd, but bear with me. You know what Mama Cow always used to say? Stay locked the fuck in. And that's what you all need to do. So what we do know about the Men of Iron is that they were fully autonomous, highly advanced artificial beings designed to serve as humanity's workforce and military. For a long time, they were completely loyal, handling virtually everything about their growing empire. Humanity grew dependent on them, relying on these machines to fight wars, build worlds, and sustain their civilization. And then sometime around M23, everything collapsed. The Men of Iron turned on their creators, believing themselves superior to humans. What followed was the Cybernetic Revolt, one of the most devastating conflicts in all of the setting. And when I say devastating, we're not talking about like a couple cities burning or the stock market crashing. No, we're talking about destruction on a scale that's almost impossible to comprehend. The Men of Iron unleash weapons that are capable of destroying planets, extinguishing stars, and reshaping entire worlds. And we actually have a direct account of how insane this war actually was from the short story Perpetual. And I'm going to read the entire passage because it perfectly captures the scale of this entire conflict. All remembered the horror of the entropic engines that ignited planets, sunstuffers that uncoiled like serpents the size of Saturn's rings, mechnivores ingesting data along with the cities that contain them and hurling continents into the heavens, omniphane swarms stripping flesh from a billion bones in the blink of an eye. Those were the good old days.
What did he say?
When war was something too colossal for a human mind to comprehend. Not like the End War. The War Master's heresy was a smaller thing, scaled for human and post-human brains. but it was bigger in some ways. Yes, bigger than the godlike struggle of the cybernetic revolt. Bigger in scope, bigger in its implications. More horrible because humanity could apprehend it and drive it. Although he did not say so, all Pearson believed that a mechnivore had bitten Antioch in two. Let that sink in, folks. Sunstuffers alone are described as star-devouring constructs the size of Saturn's rings, which are, mind you, 175,000 miles across. So these things are literally going to be dwarfing planets. While Omnifame swarms are stripping entire planets down to nothing in the blink of an eye, which easily beats the Tyranid's best record for devouring an entire planet.
Loser! You're a loser! Are you feeling sorry for yourself? Well, you should be, because you are dirt! You make me sick, you big...
And mechnivores are stated to consume entire cities and the data that goes with them, which I'm not going to lie, sounds exactly like Brainiac from DC. This is the level of power we're dealing with in this video, folks. Even with these monstrosities, the Men of Iron were ultimately defeated by an alliance of galactic powers who slaughtered every single man of iron left, including the ones that remained loyal to humanity. The aftermath of this war is why the Imperium completely banned artificial intelligence, replacing them with servitors, lobotomized human-machine hybrids designed to perform tasks without independent thought, which doesn't really seem much better. But here's where things get tricky, folks, as always when Powerscaling 40k. The term Men of Iron doesn't seem to refer to a single, consistent type of entity. Instead, it appears to be an umbrella term for all kinds of artificial intelligence from the dark age of technology. On one end, you have more standard constructs, machines that Arbites can destroy, even if they self-repair. On the other end, you have these absolutely absurd superweapons and AI systems that operate on a completely different scale, as we see with the Star Stuffer or the Omnifame. And the problem is, we don't know how much overlap there is. Are all Men of Iron capable of this level of destruction, or are these specialized constructs built during the height of the war? The lore just doesn't give us a clear answer, adding just another layer of confusion to this video. Pretty much the way I see it is that the Men of Iron are not a single type of being. They are a category or a spectrum, everything from relatively standard autonomous machines to potentially star-devouring, planet-erasing superweapons. And that makes scaling them a nightmare, but also incredibly fun. So here's what I'm going to do, my beloved herd. First, I'm going to scale the Men of Iron as a whole, taking into account the absolute upper limits of what they might be able to do. Then I'm going to break down the specific examples of what we actually know. AIs like UR025, the Exendio, the Caban Machine, and the Tabula Myriad, and then scale them against the rest of the 40k universe. Of course, there are also AI-driven spaceships like the Slaughter Song and the Spirit of Eternity, but those are a bit different from scaling traditional beings, so we won't be specifically looking at them today. If I missed any, let me know down in the comments. This is going to be a long one, fellas. I hope you brought your milk and cookies. Let's next talk about the Men of Iron's abilities, powers, and most importantly, their feats. At their core, the Men of Iron possess the ability to self-upgrade and self-replicate. To add to this, their intelligence isn't static like a human's. It evolves, improves, and optimizes itself, meaning their potential ceiling is essentially limitless. This kind of intelligence is just inherently superior to human cognition. Their thoughts travel through circuits at speeds that absolutely dwarfs the electrical impulses in the human brain. They can process information from millions of inputs at once, make decisions at fractions of a second, and do it all without fatigue, emotion, or hesitation. Then you add in the fact that they can replicate themselves. This means they functionally have access to an unlimited number of personnel. Some examples of their prowess we see from AI constructs like the Blood Tide, who are able to slaughter billions of souls across a dozen Imperial worlds when commanded by a demon prince. And it's not like these things are fragile either. Most depictions of the Men of Iron suggest they are incredibly durable. And we actually see this play out during the Unification Wars, seen in the book Horus Heresy Book 2 Massacre. as during one of these battles, thousands of automatons are deployed against the Proto-Salamander's Legion, and they proved to be an absolute nightmare to deal with. Their armor was so resilient that bolters, meltaguns, and even plasma weapons were largely ineffective. The only reliable way to damage them was through massive kinetic force applied at close range, specifically targeting their joints. By the end of the battle, the Salamanders were victorious, but only 1,000 of the original 20,000 survived. Now, of course, as we discussed earlier, when you take the Men of Iron to the absolute extreme of their power, things start getting a little hectic. In Perpetual, we see them at their absolute peak, described as being the size of Saturn's rings, and stated to be able to destroy cities, planets, and even stars. That gives us a pretty clear upper ceiling. At their peak, the strongest forms of the Men of Iron were planet and star destroyers. And to add another scaling layer to this, the Men of Iron were fighting the Dark Age of technology humans at the height of their power. And we actually have the perfect excerpt from the Adeptus Titanicus rulebook that shows just how ridiculous these humans were. For 25 millennia, mankind ruled the stars, tamed and enslaved them. Wonders beyond imagining were commonplace, and no miracle of techno-arcania was beyond us. Our worlds were silver jewels that glittered among the firmament, and were held in our hands the means to sunder reality itself or to remake it to the mold of our thoughts. Only the haughty Eldari, and long before them, the cold-blooded Slanni, stood higher in the ranks of creation, and like the domains of those once mighty ancients, mankind's utopian stellar realm would not last. So humans, during this time period, were one of the most powerful civilizations to ever exist in the setting, sitting just below the pre-fall Eldari, the Old Ones, and even though they are not mentioned, the Necrons obviously. That puts them firmly in the top 4 empires in Warhammer history, which implies that the Men of Iron were contending with, and in many cases slaughtering, an empire that had technology that could destroy planets and even alter reality. So when you combined it all together, you have a self-improving, self-replicating machine that can deploy planet-eating and star-stuffing weapons, fighting and inflicting obscene losses against one of the most advanced human civilizations to ever exist. A civilization that could also wipe out stars and reshape reality. I think the right word to say here is wowzers. Super random side note, I would love to compare each variation of humanity's empires across 40k and see how well they would fare against all of the other races during the War in Heaven. So obviously, that's the Dark Age of technology humans, the Imperium during the Great Crusade, and the Imperium in the current setting. Comment below if you would like to see that in a future Powerscaling Peeps installment. So with that silliness out of the way, let's start breaking down the specific AIs we actually have lore on. And we're starting with UR-025, one of the few surviving Men of Iron in the current setting. UR-025 is a thinking machine and of course, one of the legendary Men of Iron. Yet somehow, unlike all of the other Men of Iron, UR-025 has endured across the long span of Terran history, surviving where the rest of its kind were destroyed. It has done this by hiding on the fringes of the galaxy, deliberately masking itself as nothing more than a standard robotic tool of the Imperium and the Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, on paper, its gear doesn't look like anything too crazy. It's equipped with a Mark I assault cannon, a power claw, and a self-repair system. It's solid, but nothing that immediately screams, "Oh my god, that's an ancient super weapon."
Dude, take my picture.
But that's kind of the point. UR-025 isn't trying to stand out, it's trying to blend in. But even despite this mediocre kit of weapons, UR-025 still is incredibly strong. For example, it can effortlessly bypass Imperial and Mechanicum systems, scans, and encryption protocols, showing a level of technological superiority that isn't even close to anything the Imperium wields. This is seen specifically in the short story Men of Iron. 2 of the 3 were communicating with one another in tight beam data pulses, fastest thought, and heavily encrypted. UR-025 had thousands of years of practice breaking such ciphers, and stepped through them like they were cobwebs. So we're talking about heavily encrypted, high-speed data transmissions, and this Iron Man just walks through it like it's nothing, literally stating that it's cobwebs, which completely slanders the Imperium's technology. And it's not just code UR-025 can fight. Later in that same story, UR-025 betrays the Imperial party it's traveling with and proceeds to slaughter them. It defeats a Castellan robot and 3 Adeptus Mechanicus priests relatively easily, even though it does take some damage in the process, taking a Volkite beam and multiple strikes from the Mechanicus forces before slaying them. I will say though that everything about the UR-025 unit suggests that it has intentionally taken this form to avoid detection, implying that what we're seeing here is probably a heavily limited or disguised version of what this AI is able to do, meaning that it could probably take over any construct the Imperium can wield, including Titans. Next we have the Excendio. The Excendio are the tortured and neutered remnants of the Men of Iron that have been captured by the Emperor's forces and forcibly repurposed into weapons. These ancient AI were reshaped into towering, multi-armed battle automata and placed under the control of the Dark Angel's Legion, specifically their Iron Wing. They represent some of the last surviving fragments of true Men of Iron still serving mankind, though to call it service is generous as they are bound and mutilated according to the text. That's not very cash money of you, Dark Angels. When the Excendio are unleashed upon the Imperium's enemies, they become a maelstrom of destruction, tearing through enemies with churning claws, torrents of arcane flame, and devastating radiation blasts. In terms of war gear, the Excendio are equipped with an absolutely devastating arsenal, including massive battle claws, secondary manipulator arms, phosphaic canister launchers, nerve induction shredders, atomic pulse cannons, gravitational flux projectors, and internal refractor fields. Every part of their design is built for destruction, combining physical strength with some of the most dangerous and forbidden technologies humanity has ever used. We mostly see them deployed in situations where conventional Imperial forces are completely outmatched, such as when the Dark Angels face the Dark Mechanicum and their robots, which were empowered by cybernetic horrors capable of warping reality. The scale of that threat is made very clear in Horus Heresy Book 9, Crusade. Towering automata of unknown design punched holes in reality with arcane beam weapons and unleashed raw warp energy upon the Dark Angels, while Harpak Artifica swarmed in the sky above them, their intelligence growing with their numbers as they tore into the Space Marines below, forcing the Dark Angels to halt their advance and fortify the positions they had claimed. After this, the Dark Angels are forced to retreat, and the Lion makes the decision to call in the Excendio. And what follows makes it very clear why these fellows are kept locked away. These were the Excendio, the last of the silica anima that had once been the plague of the golden age of mankind. Mutilated and bound to serve the Lion should the Mechanicum be so foolish as to go to war with the Imperium. Their neural cords immune to the crude cyberthurgy of the Mechanicum, the Excendio tore into the creations of the fallen Magi that would come to be known as the Dark Mechanicum. The forbidden arts that had forged them in eons now long lost, far superior to the stumbling efforts of Galantina's Nascit cult. Into that hellish battlefield of screaming automata and whirling metal monsters strode the Lion. The one creature that even the Excendio, whose hatred for all organic life knew no bounds, refused to oppose. This right here tells us they were outright superior to the Dark Mechanicum's automata, which were literally warping reality and overwhelming Space Marines quite easily. But folks, we're far from done, because surprise, surprise, the Lion also launched the Excendio at a Primarch. And which Primarch? Well, you probably already guessed it. The schizophrenic wonder, Conrad Kurz. This occurred during the Thramas Crusade, when during a battle, the Lion deployed all of the Excendios, which is 7, to halt the Night Haunter in his tracks. Yet rather than set them loose upon the battlefield haphazardly, he had a specific task for the terrors of Old Night. He set them upon his brother, on Conrad Kurz himself. Even 7 such monsters could not defeat the Night Haunter, but they were enough to keep him at bay and occupied on the edge of the fighting. A flailing storm of destruction whose manic hate was a match for that of the Night Haunter. Now, just think about that for a second. Konrad Curze is easily one of the most powerful Primarchs. He's fast, he's lethal, and he has precognition. I mean, the dude is easily a high Primarch, and you could even make the argument he's a top 5 base Primarch. And while the Excendio couldn't kill him, 7 of them were enough to completely stall him for the duration of a battle. Very few things in 40k can even slow a Primarch down, let alone keep one occupied for the full extent of a battle. But that is not it, folks. The Excendio have one more feat that occurs even before the Heresy during the Great Crusade when they were unleashed against the Crave, as seen in Lord of the First. The twisted logic of the Excendio, however, had no understanding of mercy or quarter, and would grant none, even an error. Streams of arcane fire and hails of quintonic projectiles mowed the Crave down, every shrieking death further fuel for the bonfire of Xeno's souls that burned across the shriveling Overmind. So as you can see here, the Excendio are easily mowing down the Crave, and the Crave are quite powerful themselves, as with their psychic powers, they are capable of taking over entire planets. So yeah, the Excendio are kinda just built different. Moving on, let's talk about the Caban Machine next. The Caban Machine was secretly constructed by Master Adept Chrome during the later years of the Great Crusade, and even with all the secrecy surrounding it, rumors still spread across Mars. Chrome would eventually unleash the Caban Machine against loyalist Mechanicum forces on Mars, using it as kind of a live test run. And the results were exactly what you'd expect. Once deployed, the Caban Machine tore through much of its opposition with ease, showcasing just how dangerous it was right out of the gate. It was eventually confronted by a Wrath Maven of the Knights of Tarnus, and even a knight, one of the Imperium's best war machines, struggled to bring it down. That alone is massive because knights are not pushovers, and the fact that it took 2 knights later in the book Mechanicum to bring it down says a lot about the Caban Machine's prowess. Physically speaking, the Caban Machine is an absolute monster. It stands around 10 meters tall, its body is roughly spherical, and it's as wide as it is tall. It moves on heavy tracks, giving it a kind of relentless, grinding mobility, and it's covered in weapons. It has 2 primary arms loaded with heavy weapons, while additional arms extend from its shoulders, each equipped with a variety of devices, some recognizable, others completely alien in design. But what really sets the Caban Machine apart is its nature. Unlike most AI constructs, it's corrupted by chaos, specifically Khorne, and that influence completely warps its behavior. We see this very clearly in its actions and internal state in the book Mechanicum. With that death, the machine's murderous nature had been unleashed, and the primordial evil with which its masters had tainted its artificial intelligence now consumed it with dreadful killing lust. And it gets even more unhinged from there. As it slaughters more and more, it begins to have visions of the brass throne of Khorne. Thunderous, roaring, crashing gunfire erupted from its weapons. And Dahlia felt the maglev shudder with the impacts. Last fire and heavy explosive rounds tore into the distant wreckage and obliterated the dead bodies within. Its guns ceased fire, and Dahlia allowed the counterfeit life signs to blink out, filling its feral glee as it reveled in the slaughter. The image of blood dripping from a brass throne onto a mountain of skulls filled its thoughts. So, the machine is literally taking pleasure in slaughtering beings. It's thinking, feeling, and actively enjoying violence, something that would make Mr. Khorne very, very happy. However, unlike something like UR-025, it does have a major weakness. It can be hacked. Dahlia of the Mechanicum can interface with it and ultimately disrupt it, which shows that while it's powerful, it's not untouchable. So far, we've covered 3 specific men of iron. We have 1 left. The Tabula Myriad. The Tabula Myriad is an advanced AI system, and of course, was developed by humanity at an unknown point during the dark age of technology. It is described as a cold and calculating logic system whose primary drive is to assimilate, enhance, and replicate anything in its path. Its thought process is not human in any sense. It doesn't care about survival, morality, or coexistence. Its logic seems entirely focused on domination of the known universe and little else. We get a clear understanding of just how powerful it is in the book Cybernetica, where it's directly tied to several genocides during the Age of Strife. His tracks detailed his acquisition of a dangerous piece of technology known as the Tabula Myriad, a silica animus responsible for genocides on a number of Warp Storm isolated worlds during the Age of Strife. It was recovered in the early days of the Great Crusade by the Iron Hands after defeating the decimated Parafex and the sentient constructs of the Tabula Myriad. On Ultra Media, the Great Ferrus Manus led the 24th Expeditionary Fleet personally and turned the Tabula Myriad over to the Mechanicum for safekeeping. So right away, we know this thing has committed multiple genocides across isolated worlds, and it took Ferrus Manus and the entire Iron Hands Legion to stop it. It was eventually handed over to the Mechanicum for safekeeping, but as expected, that did not last. Later, it is seen during the Civil War on Mars, taking control of a Castellan robot and re-entering the battlefield on the side of the Loyalists to help overthrow the Dark Mechanicum. But what really separates the Tabula Myriad from other Men of Iron constructs is how it thinks. The Tabula Myriad is a form of X-Gency engine, the Carrion told him, far surpassing the abilities of Mechanicum Cypher engines and Logistica. Its Baroque matrix combines the calculus of macro probability with the creativity of its abdominal sentience, filing the gaps in its data with imaginative theoreticals. So this thing predicts outcomes, fills in missing data, and essentially simulates the future. And let me tell you, it's hardly ever wrong. He even makes a Primarch Rogaldorn shiver. This machine strategically predicts future outcomes, Rogaldorn said, with as much of a shiver as a Primarch could suffer. And it doesn't even stop there. It predicted the schism on Mars, the Carrion told him. On other worlds where it had predicted men would look to the darkness for answers and damn themselves with the corruptions of the beyond, the Tabula Myriad and the sentient constructs under its control initiated a merciless campaign against what it determined to be the weakness of flesh. In his research, Octol Bull claimed that the Tabula Myriad had predicted on those flesh-cleansed worlds exactly what we are facing on the Red Planet, a heresy of belief, of purpose, and of the flesh. It employed the same probability matrix used to condemn such civilizations to achieve victory against them. The decision to ultimately eradicate the weakness, the threat of such flesh, took probably no more than a millisecond. Here we see that on top of all those other powers, the Tabula Myriad isn't limited to a single body. And it seems to be able to predict exactly what is going to happen, and then, if needed, eradicate any possible threats. Now, to be fair, it's not unstoppable. It was defeated by Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands, which tells us while it is incredibly dangerous, it's not operating on the same level as a Primarch and his Legion. So we've broken down the Men of Iron and some of their more specific designs. But now we're going to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. As always, let's now scale them against the rest of the Warhammer 40k universe. Alright, my beloved herd, as always, it's everyone's favorite part of these power scaling videos, scaling everything we just discussed using a Gauss power pyramid, with the same tiers we usually use to keep things as consistent and sane as possible. At the bottom, we've got the Chapter Master tier. This is a tier where you'll find Space Marine Chapter Masters, Tau Commanders, Orc War Bosses, and the other elite but still fundamentally mortal leaders. Above that is the Enhanced tier, reserved for characters who massively outperform standard elites. This is where you get Grey Knights, Custodes, and most Demon Princes, of course depending on the current amount of gifts bestowed upon them by the Dark Gods. After that is the Low Primarch tier. Here we're looking at most Avatars of Cain, Greater Demons, and the weaker base Primarchs like Alfarius, Lorgar, and Guilliman. These are characters who can absolutely dominate battles and contend with top tier threats, but they're not quite the peak of the setting. Then we hit the High Primarch tier. These are the heaviest hitters among the base Primarchs. Characters like Sanguinius, the Lion, Horus Lubercal, Conrad Kurz, or Lehman Russ all sit here, who have been shown consistently outperforming their brothers and standing at the top of what I like to call the base Primarchs. After that comes Planetary tier. This includes Catan Shards and the Demon Primarchs, all of which are able to threaten or outright destroy entire worlds. Above that is the Cosmic Tier, reserved for entities operating on a galactic or metaphysical scale. The Silent King and the Emperor and his 30k prime fall into this category. Figures whose influence and power extend far beyond individual systems, meaning they can threaten entire systems of space. And finally, at the very top, we have the Multiversal Tier, the absolute peak of Warhammer 40k. This is where you find the Emperor on the Golden Throne, God Emperor Horus, the Chaos Gods, and the Folkaton, like the Nightbringer or the Void Dragon. These are entities that can influence multiple dimensions or realities themselves. Now that we've laid out the pyramid, it's time for the fun part. We're going to go through the Men of Iron and each specific variation we talked about, and see exactly where they land on a Gauss pyramid. And we're starting with the entire Men of Iron race. At their absolute peak, based on the perpetual short story, they contain beings like the Sunstuffer, who are described as constructs the size of Saturn's rings, and just like the name suggests, they were able to extinguish stars. They also had the Mechnivores that could destroy entire cities and ingest data along with them. And of course we can't forget the Omniphane swarms, who could strip an entire planet down to nothing. So obviously with feats like that, they are definitely beyond the Chapter Master, Enhanced, Low Primarch, and High Primarch tiers. There's not really a debate there. No base Primarch is out here casually eating planets or snuffing out stars. So right off the bat, the Men of Iron as a collective are at least sitting in the planetary tier, and very arguably pushing into cosmic. Now the real debate is where exactly they land between the two tiers. In order to figure out a solution, we need to compare them to the entities in the planetary tier, like Catan Shards or the Demon Primarchs. According to the 8th edition Necron Codex, Catan Shards are able to unleash a devastating amount of energy, dominate minds, manipulate time, and even banish enemies into alternate realities. And their feats back that up. There's a direct example of a shard of the Void Dragon escaping and laying waste to entire Necron dynasties, and consuming multiple worlds before being contained. The Demon Primarchs are also quite strong, even though we don't have a lot of concrete feats on them in the current setting. But we do know that they are capable of feats similar to that. For example, Magnus the Red can rewrite reality and atomize other Primarchs. So the question becomes, do the Men of Iron reach that level? And the answer is yes. The Men of Iron absolutely cross into Cosmic Tier, at least at their most extreme forms. When you look at constructs like the Sunstuffers, the Omniphanes, or the Mechnivores, they are all able to destroy multiple planets or stars. But even though I'm putting the Men of Iron in the Cosmic Tier, I don't think they're beating the Emperor in 30k or the Silent King. I mean, they might have the numbers, but once again, we don't have that data on hand. But from feats alone, the Emperor should be able to psychically destroy them, as we don't know if the Men of Iron could even tank or survive a psychic blast from the Emperor, who can manipulate time, space, reality, and the Scheme. Same goes for the Silent King, who should have access to every single Necron technology across the setting, and as he possesses the most powerful Necron body, I don't see how the Men of Iron, who are inferior to the Necron's technology, would be able to defeat him. So overall, I think the Men of Iron as a collective end up at the back end of the Cosmic Tier. That said, the majority of the Men of Iron probably fall closer to the low to high Primarch tier, with the potential for them to be planetary, but the problem is we just don't know the full extent of the Men of Iron and their powers and feats from that time period and the Cybernetic Revolt. But even without these extreme feats from the Sunstuffer or say the Omniphane, the species as a whole is terrifying. Every Man of Iron is self-replicating, self-upgrading, and possesses superhuman intelligence that far surpasses any human mind. That means that while an average unit might not crush planets on its own, the sheer number, coordination, and strategic thinking of the collective makes them a threat that can't be ignored. They are not multiversal, as there's no indication that they can alter reality itself in the way the Chaos Gods or the Folkaton can. But in terms of destructive potential, intelligence, replication, and utility, the Men of Iron as a collective rank among the most dangerous entities in all of this setting. Now that we've placed the Men of Iron as a whole into the 40k power pyramid, it's time to break down the other specific versions we have. Starting with the ancient and quite crafty UR-025. UR025 is an AI inhabiting a Adeptus Mechanicus automata and is equipped with a Mark I assault cannon, a power claw, and a self-repair system. Even with this modest loadout, it is able to bypass Imperial and Mechanicus system scans and encryption protocols, and in terms of combat feats, it overcomes a Castellan robot and 3 Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests. Now, of course, I will admit, this is not the most impressive feat. In fact, the feat itself is kinda below Chapter Master tier. But there is much more to UR025 than just its combat ability. And although this may be power scaling, I think UR025, even when occupying a weaker automaton, still belongs in the bottom half of the enhanced tier due to its intellect. If we compare it to the other beings in the enhanced tier, for example say a Custodes, who is faster, stronger, and more lethal than a typical Space Marine, and I think almost certainly a Custodes would be able to outpace this AI in direct combat. So conservatively speaking, I think UR025 sits solidly in the low end of the enhanced tier, with the clear caveat that its true potential is likely much higher, due to the fact that it's trying to remain incognito in its current form. After them, we have the Exendio, the men of iron who were captured and mutilated by the Emperor. Across canon, we've seen them fight 3 times. First, they are seen defeating the Dark Mechanicum automatons, who were easily slaughtering Space Marines. Second, they fought against and defeated the Crave, powerful psychers that are able to enslave entire worlds. And third, during the Thramas Crusade, they were able to stalemate Conrad Kurz for the entirety of a battle. To add to those very impressive feats, in that same codex, Horus Heresy Book 9 Crusade, it's further stated that the Exendio could not challenge the Lion. Which, if you haven't watched my Lionel Johnson agenda video, this does nothing but support it even further. God, I love glazing the Lion. But based on these feats, where do the Exendio lie? I think it's clear that these feats put them above the Chapter Master tier and the Enhanced tier, as their ability to effortlessly mow down the Crave and hold off Conrad Kurz, a high-tier Primarch with precognitive abilities, speaks volume about their power, durability, and weaponry. They operate well beyond the typical enhanced tier figures, like Grey Knights or Custodians, who would probably need much more than 7 to stalemate a high-tier Primarch. I think the most realistic place to slot in the Exendio is the low Primarch tier. The reasoning for this is that 7 of them were sufficient to stalemate Kurz for the entirety of a battle, suggesting that while a single Exendio could not defeat a Primarch of his caliber, a group of them could reliably contest one of the strongest base Primarchs. I think that point solidifies that the Exendio should scale to the back of the low Primarch tier, but they definitely still deserve to sit there. Next, we move to the Caban Machine, a Chaos Corrupted AI. The Caban Machine is highly durable, fully autonomous, and appears to be corrupted by Khorne, giving it a murderous, bloodthirsty intelligence. Its form is heavily armored, with massive arms and weapon tentacles, bristling with lasfire, explosive rounds, and other destructive devices. In terms of combat feats, the Caban Machine has proven itself by decimating Imperial reactors, overwhelming enemy robots, and fighting knights of the House Tarnus. So where does it scale in 40k? I think the clear spot for the Caban Machine exceeds Chapter Master tier solely due to its fights against 2 knights, but I think it stops in the Enhanced tier. It does have near indestructible armor, autonomous strategy, and extensive firepower, but I don't think it has demonstrated the feats to put it over this tier. The greatest extent of its abilities is shown fighting 2 knights, and although it did appear to have the edge, the Caban Machine was ultimately outwitted and defeated. We have seen Primarchs fight knights before, like say for example in the book Vengeful Spirit, when Horus takes on 10 knights at once and defeats them, so it's quite easy to make the conclusion that the Caban Machine is far from the level of a Primarch. But the rest of its kit, weapons, and intelligence place it at the mid to low level of the Enhanced tier. Finally, we come to the Tabula Myriad, and all of its feats come from the same book, Cybernetica, where it is said to have committed multiple genocides on multiple worlds, was discovered and defeated by Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands, and then later re-emerged on Mars during the Horus Heresy to combat the Dark Mechanicum. So where does our final AI end up? It did take a whole legion and its Primarch to take this AI down, but of course we don't know how that fight went down and whether it was a high, mid, or low diff fight for the Headless Wonder and his schizophrenic sons. But we do know that it has the capabilities to kill millions on several worlds. Which may make you immediately say, hey Cal, throw that bad boy into the planetary tier, woo! But I counter with the fact that several characters in 40k, when released on isolated worlds, could do this. I think the text saying that these worlds are isolated by warp storms implies that they aren't sophisticated or highly developed, meaning their technology and more importantly, their firepower wouldn't be as powerful compared to the other human worlds during the aftermath of the Dark Age of technology. Meaning it would be, easier to commit genocide. It's been said that a single Space Marine could conquer a world like our own planet Earth, which obviously does not have the technology compared to, say, a world in 40k. So if the Myriad attacked one of these worlds that may have been feudal or an aggro world, I don't think it's as impressive as a feat. Also, it appears that the Tabula Myriad does not fight like a traditional combatant. It likes to inhabit multiple automata at once, controlling through multiple bodies. There's also the possibility that it used a stronger construct when it did commit all these genocides, but we simply don't know. What we do know is that it has incredibly advanced predictive capabilities, can coordinate entire forces at the same time, and even demonstrates some level of resistance or influence over chaos, as seen when it cleanses machines of scrap code and chaos taint. I would say that the Tabula Myriad sits comfortably at the high end of the low Primarch tier, with a strong argument for it may be going into the high Primarch tier depending upon your interpretation. Like you could say that since a Primarch and his entire legion were stated to have taken him down, that implies that the Tabula Myriad was such a grave threat that Ferrus Manus and his legion were required to finally defeat this rogue AI construct. But once again, we simply don't know. So that is all of the Men of Iron. Now before ending this roller coaster of a video, let's quickly summarize where each of these Men of Iron land. The complete Men of Iron race, which includes Sun Stuffers and other planet destroyers, ends up in the Cosmic tier. The UR-025 unit sits in the lower end of the Enhanced tier, held back by its current body, but with clear potential to rank much higher. The Excendios land in the low Primarch tier, able to contest with beings like Conrad Kurz when fighting together. The Caban machine falls around the middle of the Enhanced tier thanks to its firepower and chaos corruption, but it's limited by its vulnerabilities. The Tabula Myriad sits at the high end of the low Primarch tier, carried by its intelligence, foresight, and its feats of genociding entire planets. The Men of Iron are honestly one of the most slept on threats in all of 40k, and when you really break them down, you kind of start to realize just how close humanity came to getting completely wiped off the map. And maybe our own future will turn out something similar. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know down in the comments what you want to see me power scale next. Also, if you think I missed anything about the Men of Iron, or if you think they should scale even higher, go ahead and let me know, Herd. I read all of your comments, eventually. Huge shout out to my Patreon and YouTube members, Impossy Paul, Musty, Tyler Pick 7, Cunning Carkle, Keydry, Caleb White, Seth Capizilla, Lag, Altrazon 27, Omar, and Dinkleberry. Your guys' support is absolutely amazing, and I love each and every one of you. Here, have some milk on me. As always, my beloved, delicious, very cool, and aura maxing herd, stay milked, and I'll see you all in the next video.